Did everybody forget that Superman himself, ye old Clark Kent, fell from the sky? That's how we got into America. Definitely not the legal way. Hi, and welcome back to my channel. It's me, Lauren, filmmaker extraordinaire, and today we're talking about superheroes. Specifically, Superman. The superhero. Fox News and some other conservatives are just freaking out over the latest installment of Superman to hit the mainstream media, and I want to talk about it because it basically stems from the director James Gunn's comments and people being morons. James Gunn's Superman hit theaters this past weekend, as I'm filming at the very least. I haven't actually seen the movie yet because I wanted to see it with my dad because he loves Superman, but he was waiting for the Wall Street Journal to review it, and the Wall Street Journal gave it not the kind of review he wants, apparently, even though every other critic and overall ratings are really good. So I waited in case my dad wanted to watch me this past weekend. He didn't, so I have to watch it coming up. But I didn't want to miss the chance to talk about this because I have spoken about Superman before in my Superman Bisexual Now video. Watch that. And I also just have a lot to say about movies and politics. Watch my other video about movies and politics. So I was like, we're talking about this. And you guys voted for it as well, so extra wins. Let's set the scene with who or what is Superman. Just in case you don't know or you need a little bit of a refresher. Superman first appeared in Action Comics #1 way back in 1938. Before it became like a Superman comic or all that other stuff. And I'm not going to pretend like I've read every comic about Superman, but I know Superman lore and Superman as a character, and I did some extra research just for this video, in fact, to make sure I wasn't saying anything totally baloney. I think people know Superman, one, for his iconic outfit, which we all know Edna Mode would not approve of because no capes. But we also know Superman for his uncanny powers and his drive to, defeat evil and fight for good. Notably, he's not technically human. He looks human, but he's from the planet Krypton. His OG name was Kal-El, and his parents basically sent him away in a little capsule to try to save his life, which worked because he lived, and he landed plop down in Smallville, which I think most people place in Kansas, though some versions have put it in Maryland for some reason. I feel like those are two really different vibes, Kansas and Maryland, where he was adopted by the Kents and became Clark Kent. I think part of his all-American vibe is because in most versions, he's adopted by these farmers, classic farmland, yay America, woot woot. And yeah, he seems like an all-around champ of a dude. Ultimately, he develops his powers, probably causes some trouble while he's learning how to control them. And then his parents are like, you should do this for good, save humanity. And he does, with the help of, his sidekicks, supporting characters, primarily romantic interest Lois Lane, and of course his various enemies that appear oftentimes, in the comics and in visual depictions of Superman. Not an original thought, but I think it's so funny that his Clark Kent disguise is just him being sort of shy, wearing glasses. And some of this works. People don't realize it's the same guy as when he's not wearing glasses and super tough. But, at the same time, there are people who watched the You Belong With Me Taylor Swift music video and didn't realize it was Taylor Swift as both girls because she had brown hair in one version because it was wig. So maybe I overestimate people's abilities to recognize other human individuals. Something else I find really fun is that his day job is as a journalist, which I think shows that even when he's not using his superpowers, he still is advocating for the people, trying to inform the public of what's going on, fighting for the truth, sharing that information. I just think that's a really nice touch because I think it shows that there are modern sort of superheroes and people out there who are also fighting for good, even if there isn't magical powers going on, because the truth is powerful. DC's 2025 Superman film is the first sort of installment of the DC Studio Cinematic Universe kind of take on the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but this is not Superman's first movie by any means, and it's not even Superman's first sort of reboot in my lifetime, as there was the whole Man of Steel with Henry Cavill, which I enjoyed, but I'm also really excited for this version. Even though Clark Kent as a character hasn't changed too much from his essence, from my understanding, aside from the fact that obviously the comics did change a bit in tone from 1938 to more of the present day, just because of various media censor laws and as different people took ownership of the brand, but people are still freaking out. So while the political chaos today, unfortunately, you may not be aware, but you probably are, that there's a really heated cultural climate and cultural divide in America, kind of the Western world at large, but especially in America, over like liberal versus conservative values and what makes something American and what's the American spirit, the American dream, who's it for. These are all things that have been really getting heated, especially with Donald Trump's push for deportation and terrible policies. A small aside, Alligator Alcatraz is a concentration camp, okay? Point blank period, and we should be not celebrating it and taking pictures by it. But back to the topic at hand. Basically, people are in a tizzy because James Gunn, the director, in a comment, did acknowledge that Superman himself is an immigrant. If that sounds insane, it is insane because we all knew this. Superman's like iconic lore is that he's not human. He fell, from the sky, from a Krypton, a different planet, into America. This is not revelatory information. Sadly, America is at such a state where even though Superman really represents an immigrant who assimilated very well and is welcome to the country, which has its own maybe things to discuss about good immigrants, people don't like the thought that he could be not their all-American boy, even though, as most people, I thought, knew that America, aside from Native Americans, everybody ultimately came from a different country, maybe longer ago. If you came, with the Pilgrims, even though most of those people died, then, we're all descended from immigrants. That's why America's the melting pot. And America has this very big, diverse, rich population because of how many different places we're all from and what we all bring to the American culture. I know some people think America has no culture, but I think they're wrong. And I will not be arguing about that. The cherry on top of the whole situation is that the comments that James Gunn made about this were released before the movie was made public. So people are freaking out about it, whole super woke, etc. And they haven't even seen the movie. They don't actually even know if their outrage is worthy or not. And from all the articles I have seen, because again, I haven't seen the movie yet, but from the articles I've seen discussing the issue, it's really not a big focal point of the movie. It's just obvious because he's not even from Earth, let alone America. It feels so stupid to say out loud because it's so basic. Additionally, Superman has always been political. I have lots of thoughts about films being political in general. I made a whole video about it, as I mentioned earlier. And superheroes especially, I think, can be used as propaganda to push basically their country's kind of overall missions, whether that's in comics, radio, TV, film. I don't think that's really up for debate. People might want to pretend it's up for debate, but when you have your hero characters fighting Nazis, that is a political thing. You may not think of it as a political thing because it's well, of course, the Nazis are the bad guys, but just because something might be maybe obvious in history's hindsight especially, doesn't mean it's not a political message. And Superman himself does fight Nazis in the comics and his depictions. He fights and stands up against the KKK. He, along with fighting, aliens and super enemies, not super enemies, super villains, he does fight against legitimate human threats that are politically not there and just also ethically not there, obviously, with racism and anti-Semitism and just lots of bad stuff. And Superman is against those things. He's the good guy. He stands for justice, equality for everybody. I don't understand the sentiment, but I do understand that some people, maybe the same people who are against DEI, think that's too woke. Because when someone who's never been oppressed witnesses equality, they can feel cast aside, even though they're not cast aside, just like other people have been uplifted. And people can be uplifted without bringing you down. And I think people miss that. But anyways, I do think that Superman as a character, as an idea, his story is maybe not as explicitly political as, say, the X-Men characters who are very usually visually different looking, versus Superman, I'd say, like, passes as like a normal dude, except for when he's, you know, like maybe flying around his cape. But from a, like, common knowledge, like, he can kind of just like chill as Clark Kent if he wishes to, versus like some of the X-Men characters really can't. It's not less political, it's not as like overt, and I think can represent a lot more the assimilation story that people try to accomplish when they come to America. And just because Superman is not a radical political figure doesn't mean he's not an immigrant, and the fact that he is an immigrant does influence his character and his upbringing, who he decides to be, what he stands for. And his arch enemy, Lex Luthor, does exploit and express xenophobia against him because of his immigration status. We can't ignore these things just because we want him to be some like all-American guy from Kansas. Plus, this isn't even the first time that visual media has even really addressed that he's an immigrant. In the 1990s, there was a whole Lois and Clark show where they directly talked about his immigration status. I don't understand why something will happen today and people are like, oh my God, it's too woke. When I was a kid, movies weren't like this, TV shows weren't like this. And it's like, they were. But you're just fragile now. You're just a snowflake now. Like, they were like this before. You just didn't realize it, maybe, because you weren't being conditioned to see like red alarm bells when these things happened. It was actually doing what it was supposed to do and introducing new ideas to children and young people and, you know, people across the board in the way that I think the power of movies and TV shows have, which is like this visual communication style. Just because you maybe remember it differently or are now like red-pilled or black-pilled or whatever, doesn't mean that the media's changed. You changed, not the media. One aspect that I don't really want to dive too much into because it's really a whole other video topic, but I felt I couldn't not mention at all, is there's also a whole like religious maybe reading of Superman, in the fact that, you know, Superman is sent away by his family to save his life. He's recovered in his little ship basket thingamabob by these nice adoptive parents. And guess who else was, you know, sent away from his family to live? Moses, in a little basket, picked up by the Pharaoh's daughter. Anyways, we're not going to go into it, but I could if you want a whole other video, because I do really like Moses overall as a character, as a story. It's actually my confirmation name, Moses. For my final thoughts, pretty much everything I've already talked about, but I personally am really excited to watch Superman. Whether my dad wants to watch with me or not, I will be watching it very soon. And I think it's probably a good thing that people are being confronted by this kind of like whoa moment, because people have these like really solid ideas and it takes something confronting them for maybe someone to change, for their mind to open. Maybe we need some cognitive dissonance and some uncomfortable feelings to make some positive change in this country, because again, what do you mean you're surprised that Superman's an immigrant? He's literally not from Earth. He's an immigrant to Earth, let alone America. I would love to know your thoughts on the topic. Do you think Superman is super woke? And if so, is that a problem? Maybe we do need a super woke. Maybe we need a super woke to combat the super stupid. I don't know. I would love to hear what you have to say, so let me know. And if you like the video, please be sure to give it a big thumbs up. Subscribe if you want to see more videos from me. And don't forget to check my community tab for polls like the one that you voted on maybe for this video. And if you subscribe, I'll see you really soon. So be sure to do that, and I'll see you next time. Bye!